Hello friends, today we are going to see Hibernate inheritance mapping tutorial in which we will map the inheritance hierarchy classes with the table of the database. As you can see over here, there are three strategies available to map the table with the inheritance hierarchy. A very first technique is table per hierarchy. In the second technique, it's a table per concrete class, and the third category is table per subclass. Let us see just brief overview of each and every strategy. In the first strategy, it's a table per hierarchy. It means that only single table will be created to map the whole hierarchy. How it will do? So one extra column which is known as a discriminator column will be added to identify the specific class. As we have specific attributes in a specific class only, so it may happen that we'll be having nullable values in a table. So for each category we'll be having two techniques. One is XML file and another one is using annotation. We'll see in a both way. The second strategy is table per concrete class. In a table per concrete class, tables are created as per the concrete class. There we know that there are two types of classes are available. One is concrete class, another is the abstract class. So it will be created table as per the concrete class. The duplicate column will be added in a subclass of the table. And in a table per subclass, tables are created as per the class, but it will be mapped by the foreign key only. So this is how we are going to see this all three categories. So let us see each and every strategy one by one. Okay, as we have seen, there are three different strategies. Let us see the first strategy, that is table per hierarchy. Now each strategy can be implemented via two ways, using XML file and using annotation. We'll see both techniques one by one. So the first way is table per hierarchy using XML file. As I have already told you that only single table will be created to map the entire hierarchy. Now to identify a specific class, one more column which is known as a discriminator column will be added in a table. This column will be having different value to identify different classes in a hierarchy. So let us see one example. So this is the first example in which employee is the superclass having two subclass. One is the regular employee, another one is the contract employee. All three classes having two fields, two different fields. So employee class having two fields, one is ID, another one is the name. Same way regular employee having two more fields, that is salary and the bonus, and the contract based employee having two more fields, that is pay per hour and contract period. Okay, let us see how to implement this strategy and what kind of changes will be there in a XML file. In XML file we must have to include the name of a superclass, the name of the subclass, the table with which we are going to map, and the discriminator column value. Okay, so as we know that employee is our superclass which is available in the package com.java t.my package. So this employee will be mapped with the table employee 121 and having discriminator column value is emp. Same way we have another classes like subclass name regular employee and its discriminator value is regular employee. In the same way another subclass, the name is contract employee and its discriminator value is a con underscore emp. Now let us see how to write this XML file. So the first thing is entire XML file will be written within the Hibernate mapping tag which is available over here, and then we must have to write class tag which will be describe the superclass. So this is your superclass will be mapped with a emp121 table and its discriminator column value is emp. Now this superclass having one primary key which is named as id itself, and this will be mapped as a increment generator. Increment generator, that means the value, the next value will be automatically incremented. The next thing is discriminator column type. So as we are putting it as a string, so just write it as a string. Now one more field is remaining with for the same class. The name of that property is name. Now let us see. After this tag, within the class tag, one more tag is subclass tag. So with this subclass tag, we have to describe the first subclass regular employee. Its discriminator value is reg_emp, and two fields available with the class, like property 1 name is equal to salary, and the second property is bonus. Complete this subclass tag. Next is one more subclass tag within a class tag, and its name is another subclass contract employee. Its discriminator value it's con_emp, and its two property name, one is paper hour and another one is contract duration. Now complete the subclass tag, complete your class tag, and complete your Hibernate mapping tag. This is the most important file when we are going to implement the strategy using XML file. Now, as I have already told you that entire hierarchy will be mapped with a single table. So as we have three classes and each class having two fields, so total 6 attributes are there, and one more attributes for the discriminator column. So ID and name are the fields of a employee, salary and bonus are the field of regular employee, which is a subclass, and paper hour and contract duration are the fields of the contract employee, which is again another subclass. So this is how the entire table will be created for the single hierarchy. Okay, as you can see that nullable values are there. So nullable ID is the primary key for the superclass. So nullable values cannot be accepted over here, and same way for the discriminator column, the nullable value is not accepted. The reason is, if it is nullable, that means null value is there, we cannot identify a specific class. So this is how the entire table will be created. Now let us understand the example of table per hierarchy using XML file. To implement this entire approach, 4 steps are there. Very first step is create the persistent class. That means we have 3 classes. First one is the employee, which is a superclass, and 2 more subclass, regular employee and contract based employee. So total 3 persistent classes will be there. Next step is create your mapping file for your persistent class. So as we have already seen one of the XML file, the same file will be created over here, employee.hbm.xml. Third one is your configuration file, in which we are going to mention the mapping file name. And the fourth step is create the class that store the persistent object. So using this particular class, we can store your persistent object. Let us see each step one by one. So very first step is create your persistent class. As I have already told you that we are having 3 classes: employee, regular employee and contract based employee. So the first class is employee.java. We are going to create Java Bean class over here. So Java Bean class is having approach is like, it has a field name, it has getter and setter method. Same way regular employee.java, again, which extends the employee, its getter and setters method, and its field as a private member. Same way for a contract based employee, having 2 more fields as a private member and its getter and setter method. So this is how we can create persistent class. Okay, now the second step is create the mapping file for the persistent class. We have already understand this mapping file for the persistent class, so I'm not going to explain it again, but the name of this file is your superclass name.hbm.xml. So the file name of this XML file is employee.hbm.xml. This file having Hibernate mapping tag within this Hibernate mapping tag will be having class tag, this class tag having a table name and the discriminator column. After this class tag, within this class tag will be having subclass tag and its discriminator column value. Same way another subclass having its discriminator column value, and then subclass tag finish, class tag finish, and Hibernate mapping tag is finished. Now third step is add this mapping file. Mapping file name is employee.hbm.xml into the configuration file. Now this configuration file is available in each project or in each example. So the name of this configuration file is common, hibernate.cfg for the configuration and the XML. So the name of this file is hibernate.cfg.xml. This file, within this file we must have to add this mapping file name. That means the mapping file which we have created earlier, employee.hbm.xml. Let us understand this hibernate.cfg.xml file. So hibernate.cfg.xml having Hibernate configuration tag, and within this tag we are having session factory tag. If you understand Hibernate architecture properly, then this tag will be very easy to understand. Now within this tag we just have to identify or describe a specific database property. Like we are going to use Oracle 9 database, so its dialect is Oracle 9 dialect. Each database having their specific dialect. You can identify different dialect from the internet. Then connection.url, so connection URL which we have been used with the JDBC, then its username and this password, and a connection driver class file. So its driver class name is oracle.driver, oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle.driver. Now this is the common for the database. Now the most important thing that we have to include mapping file name over here. Our mapping file is employee.hbm.xml. So just add mapping resource as a employee.hbm.xml. Now that's all for your hibernate.cfg.xml. Now this hbm2dll.auto is describing that if table is not available in a database, it will automatically create it. Now create the class which stores your persistent object. Now we are going to communicate with a table of a specific database. So the file name is storedata.java. We are going to import our file. If you are using IDE, it will be automatically imported. Now to store or to retrieve a value from your database, we must require a transaction object. So to create a transaction object, we require begin transaction method of a session class. So to create a transaction object, we require session object. But to create a session object, we require session factory object. This is over here. And to create a session factory object, we require configuration object. So simply we can create a session object via configuration.configure.build session factory.open session. While in a configure, we can pass our configuration file name, which is common, hibernate.cfg.xml. Now once we will be having session object, we can create transaction object using session.begin transaction. Now we have a transaction object. So now create persistent class object as we have three persistent class: employee, regular employee, and contract based employee. So let us create the object of each class: employee E1, regular employee E2, and contract based employee E3. Superclass employee having only two fields, one is ID and one other is the name. ID is in a incrementer mode, so we are not going to set the ID, but we are going to set its name, E1.setName. Same way, regular employee can access the field of its superclass, so using E2 we are going to set the name and this set salary and the set bonus. Set name is the method of the employee class. but regular employee is the subclass of a class employee, we can access its method. Same way for the contract employee. In a contract employee, we are going to set the name, set its paper hour, and set contract duration. Now after setting each fields, now we are going to save our object. To save our object, we have a different method. Save is also the method, but we are going to use persist method. So session.persist. Now there is a difference between persist and save, but we are not going to cover it right now. So first of all, persist the object, session.persist e1, e2 and e3, and then we can commit our transaction. Once you commit the transaction, you can close the session object, because transaction object is created via session. We must have to close the session object after committing the transaction, and then you can print whatever the message you want to display. So this is how we can create the table per hierarchy using XML file. Thank you. In the next session, we are going to cover how to create table per hierarchy using annotation. So you can see this table. We have ID, type, name, salary, bonus, paper hour, contract duration. Type is employee, regular employee, contract employee. ID and type cannot accept null value, but rest of the fields can accept the null values. So this is how the table will be created per hierarchy. We have already seen our first approach, that is table per hierarchy using XML file. Now let us see the second approach, table per hierarchy using annotation. In this approach, we are going to eliminate Hibernate mapping file, which was named like employee.hbm.xml. We have mentioned the discriminator column value in a Hibernate mapping file, as well as the fields of each class and the name of a table. So we must have to do certain step that we can implement this all thing in a persistent class and into the hibernate.cfg.xml, that means configuration file. Let us see how. So we have different kinds of annotation, and that we are going to mention within the persistent class itself. For example, as we have a first approach, that is inheritance type is single type, its inheritance type is strategy is equal to inheritance type dot single table. Its discriminator column can be mentioned like discriminator column, and its value can be mentioned via discriminator value annotation. Let us see the example, so all things will be clear very easily. So the first thing is create the persistent class. Rather than creating a normal Java Bean class, we are adding some annotation in this file, like add entity, which will describe this is the class. Add table, that means this entire hierarchy will be mapped with a table name is employee 101. This is the inheritance strategy, inheritance type dot single underscore table. Discriminator column will be mapped as a name is equal to type, and discriminator type is discriminator type dot string, and its value can be described as employee. Now this field table, inheritance and discriminator column can be mentioned only one time in a superclass only. In the rest of the classes, we are just going to mention the discriminator value only, right? So this is all about the annotation in a superclass. Then let us start this superclass. So the public class employee, its primary key, that means ID is named as a IDE, and this is its generator is auto, so automatically it will take the strategy. Now we have mentioned the column name is ID. For the name, the column name is name itself. Now let us see the regular employee. In a regular employee, add the entity, mention this is the class, discriminator value is regular employee, and salary is one of the field, column name, and bonus is another field. again it's a column name, and the getter and setter method. Same way for the another class contract based employee, its column name and discriminator value is contract employee. So this is how we can create the persistent class. So persistent class can be created. So we have already mentioned the name of the discriminator column, discriminator type, and the table name. Now second step is add this persistent classes in a configuration file directly rather than mentioning the hbm.xml file. So we must have to include this mapping file employee, contract employee, regular employee into the configuration file. So your configuration file having Hibernate configuration tag, within that tag we are having session factory, rest all the fields are as it is, which we have seen within you example using XML file. These 3 lines have been added rather than mapping resource and the name of a Hibernate mapping file. We are having individual persistent class name. So the class name is employee, contract employee, and regular employee. Now again the last step is same, create the class that store the persistent object. So first of all we must have to create transaction object. To create a transaction object we require session object, and for session object we require build session factory object, and for session factory object we require configuration object. But rather than configuration object, in annotation we require annotation configuration object. So create first of all annotation configuration object, then create the session factory object, then create the session object, and finally we'll be having transaction object. Once you will be having transaction object, create the persistent class object e1, e2, e3, set the properties, and then you can persist the all object. Commit your transaction, close your session, and display whatever the message you require. So this is how we can implement the table by hierarchy using annotation. Now there will not be change any kind of field value in output because the table is as it is. Only the developing side some changes are there, as we are going to use annotation. So if we are going to use annotation, it will eliminate the Hibernate mapping file. So thank you. This is how we can implement table per hierarchy using XML file and using annotation.